That's a good cycle.
We're on live. We're on live, Women. I'm hearing you from I'm hearing the person from the background here. Um, Let me play the intro to the Progressive Diary. Okay, yes, welcome once again. We are here talking about the Progressive Diary. The Progressive Diary is going to come your way very, very soon. That will be beginning February. And we have with us my co-host, the Honorable Comrade Wilmer Smith, who share with me this idea and the platform to listen to the progressive in terms of what they think is happening to Liberia now. How much do they appreciate the struggle that they got involved in yesterday, looking at what Liberia is now and what are their stories? So, Comrade Smith, thank you for being here, and you can give your perspective on the Progressive Diary and say to the Liberian people what they should expect on the menu.
Thank you, Comrade Gwidi. Let me say good evening to the listening audience, and commend you for agreeing to make this subject matter one for the national discourse. And it's a very critical discussion. Because our country, Liberia, the country called Liberia today, the formation of Liberia was fundamentally flawed. You have less than or not more than 300 persons coming from the Americas, the American Liberians, free slaves, former slaves, being removed from the United States and brought to the Cherbourg Island in Sierra Leone. And there are historical accounts that they had to leave Cherbourg Island to come to Montserrado because of malaria. And research has shown that it was more than malaria that caused them to relocate. They were told to pay taxes. They were not willing to pay taxes. They were evading taxes. And so they had to look for another source spot to land. And that source spot was on the Montserrado River on what we now call the Providence Island. So those group of people who came met the indigenous people, the mass base of our people across what we now call Liberia, carrying their normal trade and traditional exchanges. Knowing fully well of the people they met on the ground, and there are also accounts that our people were coerced, they have our people at gunpoint to get the land given to them and stuff like that. Whatever the case is, there were more people on the ground and less people who came from the America. And that minority group, few persons form a government, declare the country a republic, but say the rest of the people, the indigenous mass, they met, were not part of the country, could not be part of their government. And so there were inherent contradictions. There are very inherent contradictions. So you look at the constitution that was written by the Professor Thomas Greenleaf. I mean, this discussion will take into consideration critically and scrupulously reviewing that constitution that guarded the Liberia First Republic. And so the people who met on the land could not own land unless it was certified by the settlers. The people who settled on the people's land were determining who is a property owner, who could vote in an elections, who were qualified to be a president, a vice president, a senator, and a representative. So too many contradictions. And like I mentioned earlier, Dr. Sawyer, who we'll talk about later on with his role in the progressive movement, when he appeared at the Peaceway Arches, Dr. Amos Claudius Sawyer of blessed memory, when he appeared before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he talked about Liberia as a mosaic. And one example was the seal and the message that was on the seal, that is still on the seal. The love of liberty brought us here. That message connotes that slaves in search of freedom came and discovered almost like the interesting, twisted Christopher Columbus narrative. So they came and discovered an empty space somewhere in what we now call West Africa on the Green Coast and formed their country. The place was empty. That is why one would say the love of liberty brought us here. Well, you were. They did not give a clear picture of what was on the land, that they came to live freely. And that was on purpose. That was the basis, the very beginning of exclusion. And so he was recommending that motto change. The motto changed to the love for liberty unite us here. Unite us here. Because majority of the people were already in the country. So you join as a minority group, you join the bigger population of the people who are already in the country. There are also debates about the wording behind the presidential seat and the seat of the speaker. Remember the pioneer children. Those are messages of exclusion. When I talk about people grabbing our land, there's another clear contradiction with the Matilda Nipot situation. The canon story just doesn't add up. Our people were murdered in cold blood only because they were advocating and agitating for their rights, that the land was their land. For those who wrote that history, the American Liberia version paints Matilda Nipo as a hero for murdering our people in cold blood. And so the naming of the streets, all of our streets in Monrovia, the major streets in Monrovia, were all named after the minority group. The American Liberian and the assimilados. And so that practice, that unhealthy, undemocratic, counterproductive practice, avoiding equal opportunity, denying our people of social justice and academic freedom, for over 133 years. Meant that the situation needed to be corrected. And 133 years is no small year. You're talking about over 13 decades plus. And so the guys were able to consolidate the consolidated power, centralize it around themselves, the children, their assimilados. And so they had the political power, the economic power was being shared with the Lebanese merchants. And so these sons and daughters that have been living in our country history as the progressive had to muster the courage. It did not start with them. But all of those who started this process, the men who stood out to Matilda Nipo in her life and they got killed in cold blood. The issue of the legendary dry living in the Cool War and our people on the hot tax issue. Mama Swakoko. We can go on and name the agents of resistance, the people who stood up for their people, even though they were murdered in cold blood, maliciously. But their blood, their sweat and blood fertilized the ground, gave rise to the new group, the group that will finally break the camel's back of 133 years of misrule. So I gave it up to them. I gave it up to them. That's a dry name. That's a Dito Twe, Edo Wimo Bloody. They were the pathfinders. They were agents of change. They did not get there. They did not get there with the Liberian people, their experience an open country. They were murdered, they were forced into exile, but they laid the foundation. And we have to remember them. They are the breadbasket. They are the foundation of the progressive struggle in our country. They are our put. And so then came the movement for justice in Africa, the Progressive Alliance of Liberia, and other progressive movements, the Vanguard Unification Party. This group of men, for the most part, had the opportunity to stay with the status quo, benefit from the largesse, enjoy the largesse and loot, and get assimilated for the rest of their lives. But they had to make a critical choice. Comfort versus standing up for change. And so they had to compromise the pomp and pageantry, the pleasure, the benefit that came with being associated with the American Liberian class. Identify their purpose and stood up to the regime, challenge the system, that there was a need, the need for change, the need for equal participation, the need for equal opportunity was needed ever before, was needed at that time than ever before. And so they launched this progressive struggle. And we have to give it up to them today. That the struggle they waged, the revolution that was launched, standing on the shoulders of the legendary Dramini, Dido Twe, Mama Swakoko, and all these progressive forces who along the way started the agitation for change. Was on their shoulder they stood and broke the camel's back. And that today, no more in our country history, no more in our country history, one group of people, one tribe, one association run the country excluding the rest of the people. No more in our country history will we have a one-party system. No more in our country history where we now have equal opportunity access to education and the universal rights, Declaration of Human Rights. So their name, their movement, the progressive movement is etched in the annals of our history for very good reasons. For very good reasons. And to them we give our right hand salute. Were they perfect? Were there missteps? Did they achieve all they had to achieve? The answers are obvious. Yes, there were missteps. Yes, overall, they could not achieve all because, like I said, for obvious reasons, the struggle has several layers. And so they achieved the biggest one first, to create a new republic. What came out of the struggle? The country became open. The one-party state of 133-year maize rule came to an end. The end of that, the country became open for all, including the very American Liberian that we all belong to this country. The new constitution was developed and established, led by the progressive forces, an exercise that was being headed by Dr. Amos Sawyer and a lot of progressive forces. And we all know the constitution again, because the regime of the day, the military regime, was indifferent to the very constitution because they had a motive, and that motive was to stay in power undemocratically. And so we know there was a Constitutional Review Committee set up to water down some of those very good points that were laid in the Constitution. Howbeit, what came out of the process was still a good working document, far better than what was done by Professor Samuel Greenleaf for the American Liberians and the decadent moribund True Party. And so they made progress. They made significant progress. And so the struggle for economic freedom, for economic empowerment, I think we have achieved if we are not experienced the political democratic miscarriage that ushered in the military junta of the People's Redemption Council, headed by the Master Sergeant Samuel Kanyado and the additional 16 enlisted men of the military. That period, the struggle experienced a miscarriage because that was not anticipated. That was not in the struggle for academic freedom, equal opportunity, and the rule of law. And so that was the turning point. Did they give up? They seized the movement to engage the military. And Komegbidi, say what you want to say about the progressive. Like I said earlier, they had a choice to work with the American Liberians. Some of them were already in the system who were assimilated. They also had similar choice to work with the PRC for the rest of their life, enjoy the largesse, the loot. So they have with the rest of the people, we are okay. Personally, I got a big job, I'm traveling, my family is good. But that group again, it took that group again. It took that group to call on the military to return to the barrack and call for an urgent election to return to civilian rule. That was not a statement that was welcomed by the military, just as it was not welcomed by the American Liberians, because nobody voluntarily surrendered their comfort zone. And so they went to jail. They paid the price. So the progressive movement have come a long way in creating, in ending the First Republic, in creating the Second Republic, in achieving democratic centralism, in achieving the rule of law, equal participation, equal opportunity. And like I said, they were on the road to achieving economic empowerment. But that could not be achieved with the miscarriage that lasted for 10 years while that system was being engaged again. That process was being again bastardized by the notorious National Patriotic Front of Liberia. And so just at the time the forces were rallying again that the 85 elections were rigged, so we'll come back as they were rallying for the 1991 elections. Then came the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, and we all know what happened thereafter. From National Patriotic Front of Liberia, we had the Independent National Patriotic Front of Liberia coming out of that. We had the ULIMO coming out, and then out of the ULIMO, we had the ULIMO K and the ULIMO J. And then out of the MPFL again, we had the CRC coming out. Then we had the LPC coming. We had the Local Defense Force. And all these multiple warring factions. And then the model, the lawyer after Charles Taylor became president. And so that process culminated into a miscarriage that undermined the progressive strive for economic empowerment. But the foundation was laid, and we have to give it to them. All of the multiple peace conferences, they were involved. And their interest was always for the general good. The intention was to ensure that there is a return to surveillance rule based on democracy. The people must decide who lead them. And those who lead them must be accountable to the people. And so we have multiple peace accords from Banjul to Cotonou to Yamoussoukro to Akosombo to Abuja, several accords. In the end, Liberia has held 3 successive elections. We can boast of having 3 surviving former presidents. We can boast of having surviving vice presidents. We have celebrated over 10 years of sustained peace. And so that is something to celebrate. That is why we must endeavor community to bring these actors at different times to give their account. Because our country is a country that is polarized. It's a country where our political history and democratic history has always been manipulated. Has not been a country of record. For the most part, we depend on getting our own country records from outside. We've not done much in terms of documenting and digitalizing our record, our historical record. That we can go to the archives, that we can go to the museum. Just by visiting the Museum of Liberia, it tells you that fundamentally the country is challenged. The country needs serious-minded people for the documentation of all of these historical events, the actors, the activities, so that our people have a fair and a factual account as to what was the First Republic, what kind of republic we had called the First Republic, what led to the end of the First Republic, how did we come about the Second Republic, what were the positive strides, what were the challenges. We need to have this documented and taught in our schools, our service schools. We have enough material from our country checker history to form part of our academic curriculum from elementary, junior high school, even up to university level, up to undergraduate, up to the law school, up to the IBB and the MBA program. Too many things. And so that is another struggle a group of Liberians need to embark on. And Commonwealth, I will encourage us with life and strength to also pursue that path. And the discussion we are about to initiate begin February will set the basis to lead us in moving into that direction. And so the progressive hour is expected to be fiery. It's expected to be informative. It's expected to be factual. And so we'll not only be getting answers from the questions we're providing to them, we'll be asking them and expecting them to bring some hard facts. There are scanty documentaries here and there that some of them have. Some people are keeping their own little stuff. We need all of those to centralize them. And like Archie Williams have been doing, he's been doing a lot. As a matter of fact, for now, locally, he's the foremost archivist. And so we need to tap and see how we can also get him on board as we document this thing. And later on, we can do all of the reviews. Because, newspaper account or written narration is not enough, depending on who writes a story. If really writes the story of the lion, the story will not be the best because that's not a lion own narrative. And so it's important they are around. Let's make use of them before they phase out. We've already seen some of them phasing out. We've lost some of our finest. The father of multi-partyism, progressive Gabriel Bacchus Matthews, a blessed memory, we've lost him. He was a reservoir and fountain of knowledge. He had a lot of information, a lot of events, a lot of occurrences. We got someone who let us stay around, can make use of them. Some of the audios, we need to have them. He worked with a lot of people. He worked with Moja. He worked with Dr. Sawyer. He worked with Dr. Mason. He worked with Community Wisa. He worked with a lot of people. He established the Progressive People Party, the PPP, before the UPP, and then moving on to the independent stuff. The last group we had on the old road there, Dr. Sawyer of blessed memory, of the movement for justice in Africa. We've lost him. He done a lot of work academically. He written some books. We can trace the work from there. He has a lot of recordings. We can tap into that. He worked with a lot of people. We can also get their perspective. And we come up with a very rich document for our country that can be used in our school for civics, for political science, for law, And so all these things, today, we have elections regularly. By the grace of God, those are the guys who are in power to lead this great struggle to get us where we are today. And so the forum, the discourse will be very important. And we have to make use of that as soon as possible. Like I said, they are phasing off. They are leaving us every day. But they will they left the stage. Liberia still remains. We need their content to be recorded and documented so people understand and have an appreciable knowledge about from where Liberia come and where Liberia is and why Liberia is where it is. People need to understand those things. And after the progressive hour, of course, we're going to be taking excerpts and interviews from members of the Decadent Chui party, they account against the reality and facts, or the facts they will be providing. Because we want to document a balanced view. So we're going to be generating the synthesis, the antithesis, so that we can provide the synthesis. We're going to be generating the thesis from them. We're going to be generating the thesis from them. We're going to be getting the antithesis from them. And we'll use our academic prowess, our research skills, reach out to people so we can provide a synthesis that will incorporate their view, the other view, and the general view. So people have an appreciable understanding. And so this is welcoming. I'd like to thank you. These are my initial comments, and I look forward to a healthy discourse.
Thank you very much, Comrade Smith. And that was a lengthy introduction of the Progressive Diary, giving the historical backgrounds and generally a general landscape of the contribution of the progressive in our country. We think that this progressive diary is not only to hear from the progressive themselves, but it has clear objectives of making sure that Liberia remains in line in terms of continuing the struggle. Because if we stop the struggle, Liberia democracy is going to bend backward, and that is actually going to ruin the gains that we've made over time. But I just want to mention that the progressive struggle in Liberia did not take a rectilinear direction. It was marked by a lot of attacks and retreat, and it was marked by a lot of camouflage and reappearance onto the stage. And there were turbulence, actually. There were turbulence, and uh, we were able to see the progressive weather the storm and get to a point where they are still able to navigate in spite of all of those turbulences. And they managed to keep focus on their objectives, and they were able to achieve their objective because most of them will say that they were able to achieve their objectives because it is clear, as Frank Fanon said, and our senior brother Dusty likes to reiterate, that every generation must, of relative obscurity, define its mission. And once you define the mission, you either have to fulfill it or betray it. But the most important part is to first of all define the mission. And for them, their mission at the time, given the historical circumstance, was political freedom. And political freedom they achieve. And we are all enjoying political freedom today. Some of us miss out on the number of sacrifices, the blood and sweat that bring us this political freedom. We are quick to hail Henry Costa, a missionary advocate, as a hero without necessarily thinking about how the space was created for Henry Costa to come and speak out. Was it possible for Henry Costa to speak during the era of Charles Taylor? That was obviously not possible. And if you come to the history, that some progressive, instead of flying like men like Henry Costa and how they call it, all of men, as a Vatoba, confronted the Taylor administration, they were beaten and they were jailed. If you come to the fact that people existed during those times and confronted those regimes, and compare it with what is happening now in a democratic environment where there isn't much happening to critics of government. So people are coming out with loud voice without a second thought that government is going to be after them. Then we must reflect and say, how did we reach this far? That Yeke Koluba can attack the government and we cannot say anything. And we must congratulate Josh Weah also, because one of the last law that remain on the book, the law criminalizing defamation that made it possible yesterday for government to prosecute dissent, was scrapped out the book and the name in honor of Kamara Abdullah Kamara, a gallant soldier in the fight for press freedom and social justice. And that is the reason why, in reference of Kamara Abdullah Kamara, we name this dialogue the Kamara Abdullah Kamara Intellectual Dialogue and the Kaki Dialogue. And it is supposed to go a very long way. The Kamara Abdullah Kamara was this uncompromising general who brings to the table integrity and did not flinch or bend backward in favor of supporting wrong. No matter what the consequences may be, Kamara Abdullah Kamara was always in the position of being very upright and being on the side of those suffering masses and continue the struggle no matter how silent he was. But his pen was never silent. And in all of those institutions that stood up to dictatorial regimes in our country after the war, Kamara Abdullah Kamara had his own share. And that is where I want to shift a little bit to talk about the progressive contribution during the Taylor era and post-Taylor. Most of the progressive, like if you see the establishment of Moja acting as a civil society institution, was simply because the progressive knew that they were being attacked on the political front and they needed some cover up. But when it came to the 90s, the progressive were in the vanguard of the upsurge or the surge of civil society organizations. So if you look at most of the early civil society organizations in Liberia, human rights and pro-democracy organizations in Liberia, they were the offspring of progressive political appetite to confront injustice in our society. You look at FAN, you see Samuel Kofi Woos. You look at Ford, you see you see Aloysius Stoll. And you look at Dan L., you see Franklin Siako. You look at Afetch, you see the likes of Dusty Wolo Coley. You look at what is the institution that Chairman Flomonya was heading? The LDRC. There was the library that Chairman Flomonya was heading, the LDRC. And you look at SEED, you see Dr. Sawyer, Ambassador Kwame Nwise, Comrade Ezekiel Pajibo, and the likes. They were progressive. Or if you went to JPC, you see the likes of Steve Wilson, some of Kofi Uzege. There were progressive brothers all over the corridor in the NGO and civil society community, continuing the engagement. So there is a rich history that we are going to learn from when we sit on the table and listen to the voices of our progressive seniors, the like of H. Boyman Famule, Dr. Tobana Tipote, Ambassador Dew Mason, Ambassador Komene B. Wise, Professor Larry Towa, Councillor Abraham Balu Misha. There are a plethora of progressive minds who are going to mount the podium and give the Liberian people a staple of progressive thoughts. And let me remind you, you are going to be stimulated. If you have never struggled and thought about struggling for Liberia, you are going to be tempted to wear the armor that those great men once wore and move and face injustice without fear. You are going to be moved to confront the ills of our society and bring power to its need. Let me leave you with Wilmer Smith again as we look at this issue of the Progressive Diary coming to you very, very soon. Comrade Smith, what do we expect in terms of the audience? What should we expect from the audience when we bring these great men to provide the kind of information that history has been holding for a very long time?
Thank you. It's going to be a Tell It All series. A Tell It All series. And we expect the audience to get glued to the interview, fasting about, and listen to the video accounts and send the critical questions. All of the issues, all of the label, all of the issues that need clarity on the progressive struggle as it relates to the format of our country. Those questions should be written down and should be asked fearlessly. And I'm very sure it will help alleviate the misinformation, the wrongful opinion formed in many quarters about the rule of the progressive. And so it's going to be a tell it all. It's going to be a tell it all series. But you try to keep point about recognizing the former president, President George Manuel Weah, um, uh, who signed into law the KAK Act. And for too long, people were crying of being politically witch hunt under the disguise of being criminally prosecuted for libel and slander. And there were some traces and good amount of evidence in those regards with respect to the regime using that law, that PRC decree, weaponizing it against civil society movement and media institutions. And that was a victory. But I think the media landscape have not done much or is not doing much in celebrating and appreciating the meaning of the KAK Act. Given the plethora of media institutions in the country, the proliferation, given the proliferation, sorry, not plethora, given the proliferation of media institution that is now compounded with this social media, online stuff, traditional and social media, you can see clearly that the space is being abused, and press freedom, the aspect that goes with responsibility, has been normalized and neutralized, and press freedom from the local team is being weaponized by political sponsors. In some instances, we're experiencing pay to play to just create frivolous and misrepresentation of people's character, frivolous accounts and misrepresentation of people's character, and just go free. The parent body, the president of Liberia, of which Abdullah Kamara of blessed memory served as president. And I remember when KAK, under the KAK leadership, they did not address all, but I can say safely that there are notable 2 infractions. I know that they took some action on PEL committee member. In fact, one of them was an executive of the PEL who got suspended for those infractions. We can trace 1 or 2 times happening. Though it has been happening, by leading 1 or 2 incidents that were action. But in recent years, it's just getting worse. And that should be a matter of concern for this forum. It's something we need to delve into community and analyze critically, and maybe get some of the actors, the leadership of the PEL. I did an article a day ago, and on today, the former PEL Secretary General, in fact, who was the Secretary General under Abdullah Kamara, retweeted. A rejoinder, but I think that was a retweet. Basically, essentially, agreeing with all of the points. So, in the field of the Abdullah Kamara Act, the PEL should be more responsible to be conveying accurate and balanced information, should be regulating her members, not censoring her members, but regulating the activities, both the print and electronic media, on what they say, what they write, making sure that it meet the journalistic creed and ethics, And where it's proving their ethical transgression, they must step in immediately to correct those things. Even if you don't want to name and shame your member publicly, should be able to call them in, erect the necessary checkpoints, and say these corrections need to be made. And I will stop there for now. But there are a lot of ethical transgressions. And if the PEL says not every journalist is a member of the PEL, which I agree, then you must not be out there for every journalist who is not a member of the PEL. But if you say you are a parent body for all, whether you are a member or not, then you must also ensure that your members and your non-members act in conformity with the practice of true journalism.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do agree with you 100%. And that goes for every other interest group in the country. Because when you are an interest group, you are part and parcel of the state, you are part and parcel of the democracy, you are part and parcel of the development of the country. Because representing an interest, a particular sector of the country, you are representing people. And when you're representing people, you are representing their interest. And ultimately, the interest of the people who we represent, whether it is from the driver union or the motorcyclist union or the press union or the teachers union, the interest of the people who you represent is to ensure a better country, a better life. They want everything to be okay with them, and so they entrust you to be able to define that path for them. But besides, institutions like the press union must also understand that they represent the interests of a larger group of people other than those particular people who sign up to be journalists. They represent the Liberian people. They represent the voiceless. That is why in the construct of our democracy, they refer to the press union as the fourth estate. The fourth estate. The fourth estate. Because if you have the public sector and then you have the other sector, there is a press union that stands between the larger populace and the other sectors of government that tend to project the voice of the people. And the other way around, because the people sign a social contract with the government, the press union is there to ensure that the social contract the people sign with the government works. That is why the media and the press union, so to speak, is a very critical part of our democracy. Because if the media is strangulated, the people are not going to be fed the information that they need to be responsible citizens in our democracy. And so the people will be making reckless decisions based on the level of information that they've received. So a good media institution or a group media union that is in the interest of our democracy, in the interest of human rights, and in the interest of development ought to be a responsible one that provide the people in better information, provide the people authentic information, and provide the people the truth as they see it. We will not be arguing that everybody should have a uniform view of what the facts is, but everybody ought to provide the facts as they see it. And there has to be standards, there has to be ethics against which people who are in that field are going to be measured by. That is why in most fields, whether it is audit or it is journalism or it is maybe soccer or whatsoever, there are rules. There are rules. We ought to be able to play by the rules. So if we want to be able to have informed citizenry, we must not leave the field to corrupt elements who go ahead with some ulterior motive, go ahead and just spew lies, innuendos, and defame people's character and go with impunity. It is one thing to say that, oh, these guys did not sign up to the Press Union of Liberia. It is good. Every individual, for that matter, has the right to enjoy freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Every individual. They don't necessarily have to sign up with the press union, but if they don't sign up with the press union, obviously they are not operating as journalists. And the press union have to be able to name them either actively or passively. Actively by naming her members, and passively by not including those people in the list that we provide to the public. These are authentic media institutions that operate by the ethics of journalism and that are under the code of ethics of the Press Union of the Republic of Liberia. If we know those media institutions every year and we know that they are in good standing with the Press Union, then we say, yes, these are the media institutions that provide credible information from us. So if we are in search of information, and if we are to authenticate a particular information, we want to first of all pick up those papers of media institutions that are accredited by the Press Union of Liberia. So the Press Union of Liberia can be very passive in their sanctioning of other media institutions that are wayward and are not attached to the Press Union of Liberia simply because they are not prepared to respect journalistic ethics. So the Press Union has to present itself in a way that they are going to be seen as that institution that still advances the creed of democracy. The Press Union in the past was very much robust. The Press Union in the past was manned by progressive forces who saw their role as media actors as a way of advancing the struggle for democracy in our country. But if today Press Union actors are in bed with mercenary media institutions, then we ought to question the authenticity of the Press Union of Liberia. Liberia is not going to develop if the Press Union does not present itself as a partner in the transformation of our country. The Press Union cannot be silent. You're not going to take people to court, but at the same time, you ought to be able to name and shame institutions that do not practice the tenets of journalism and whose work might undermine the progress that we've made in the country by reporting information that tend to attack the character of individuals and are plain violation. If they are not your members, simply report to the public that they are not your members. And if you have a funding from a party who has been injured, it is wise for the press union to be that beacon of hope and say to the Liberian populace that the character of an individual has been injured by XYZ institution purporting as a media institution, but the press union condemned that practice. It is not like silencing any institution or stopping them from airing their views. It is only to show that there is no double standard in the fight for democracy and human rights when it comes to freedom of expression. So we ought to actually look at this important deviation and the silence of the PUL when there is a breach of ethics by wayward local media institutions. And I get it. I get it. Yesterday, there was Henry Costa who tried to define what he called a journalist and a political commentator. He defined a journalist and a political commentator. He said, as a political commentator, you don't need to register your institution with the press union. That is it. Anybody can get on the media and just say what they have to say. They don't need to register with the press union. But at the same time, the press union ought to be very robust and protect the borders of the integrity of the press. Otherwise, what is happening in Liberia now is that we cannot establish those institutions that are genuinely press union satisfied institutions and are genuinely putting out factual information in the media landscape. And those institutions that are merely just reporting on their own and they are skewed towards propaganda rather than doing the work of providing information, credible information for our people to consume. We ought to distinguish between those institutions. The only institution that can help us do that is the press union by annually coming up with a bulletin of credible institutions in the country and directing the public to those institutions so that they have factual information separated from them.
Very important perspective. Come,
Yep.
I think that was a very interesting perspective.
Yeah. So I don't know. Time is fast spent.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
we should wrap up now.
yeah, we can take up time sometime to really dive into this the press union and the proliferation of quote unquote media institutions in the country and the kind of information that they give out, they put out there, and what is the press union of Liberia role, and how do they intend to make sure that the Liberian people are not uh, tailored in the wrong direction in terms of consuming the wrong information. And even if the wrong information is out there, how do the press union intend to make sure that the Liberian people have a fair share of the best information, credible information, by introducing to the Liberian people those credible institutions that are registered with the Press Union of Liberia and who uh, pledge to uphold the ethics of responsible journalism in the country. So as we move on, we are going to be introducing the Progressive Diary by February, introducing some of our finest comrades. We are going to be sitting with some of our comrades in person of Comrade Jefferson Kamo, Adolphus Kanoa, J. Nyanko Ezeze, the chairman of LPP, Mansfi Dwopo, Professor J. Kakura Fode, Dr. Dua Chris Nyan, Chairman Daniel Kier, Thomas Du, coming to be Wise, Ambassador, Professor Roosevelt Tule, Dr. George Klikie, Honorable Blamo Nelson, Honorable Samuel Kofi Woos, Professor Edwin Jua, Professor Jiwe A. Jiwe, Comrade Badi Toba, Comrade Professor Richard Panton, Comrade Dempster Yala, Dr. Jipo Natia, Comrade Ray Martin Towo, Comrade James Yasia, Comrade George King, Comrade Honorable D. Kankalo. We are going to be having Comrade J. Meton Tiaji, George G. Platiclo Conto, Dr. Tobana Tipote, Anthony V. Kessely, Honorable Anthony V. Kessely, Professor Alari Toba, Councillor Tiawon Gonglo, Comrade Nathan P. Gabi, Honorable Jonathan Weeder, Comrade Trouble Soar, Comrade J. Afis G. Comrade Ezekiel Pajibo, Reverend Bartholomew Cole, Comrade Honorable Samuel Jackson, Intellectual Firepower, Comrade Sanaway, Comrade Peter Kiado, Dr. Du Macy, Ambassador, and Councillor Abraham B. Mitchell, amongst others. We are also going to be interviewing to close an uncompromising and indefatigable intellectual in person of Dr. H. Boima family. So follow Vote 24 TV, like and share, and you are definitely going to be notified in February when the program starts. It has been nice talking with you, and we thank you for being with us for the period of time that we spent here, about an hour and 50 minutes. And we hope to come by tomorrow to give you more of what we have. We continue to introduce to you and request that you like and follow Vote 24 TV for the Progressive Diary series beginning February. Thank you. It has been a wonderful time spent with you. We're just going to play the Progressive Diary intro. Yeah, Wemo, you can just close and then we'll go.
I think it's been a good evening discussion, and my anticipation, for obvious reasons, is that the progressive dialogue is going to be revealing. Like I said, it's going to be a tell-it-all series, and so we're going to learn a lot. We're going to ask a lot of questions. We're going to generate a lot of understanding, so that in the end, we can centralize all of the information, process it, that it will be meaningful to the growth of our society. So as usual, we'll be there, and I'm just upbeat, optimistic, and that we are heading in the right direction. And in the coming days, February is right here, we'll be helping to rewrite our Liberian history.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye to the Liberian people. We come by tomorrow and hoping to have a fascinating program tomorrow. Have a good night.